Hello, this is Chris Wenker. I'm a GIS epidemiologist at the New Mexico Department of Health. This is a training video for the IBIS community of practice. I will describe the different ways that GeoJSON map layers can be applied in IBIS, and we'll go over the necessary fields in the attribute tables that need to be included for each type of layer application. Map layer files consist of more than just point, line, and polygon shapes. They also have attribute tables, where each geographic feature is associated with a unique record of data values. We have a couple reasons to pay attention to the attribute tables. First, certain fields need to be present in order to be able to link to an IBIS database. And second, excess fields that don't get used can make for larger file sizes, which slows down web performance. Let's start and take a look at the choropleth layers. These are the layers that depict geographic areas that are shaded with a color ramp, according to the grouped value ranges in the underlying database. In IBIS, we don't actually see the attribute values that are part of the GeoJSON file itself. What we are accessing in these pop-ups are the IBIS database values. Let's take a look at the inner workings of a GeoJSON layer that supports a choropleth. This layer only requires two fields, GeoID and title. Both field names are case sensitive. Title is a string field that contains the name of the geographic area, and GeoID can either be a string or an integer field that contains the numeric code for the same geographic areas. It's important to point out that whatever values are used in GeoID must exactly match the IBIS query dimension values, because this is what links us to the database. So even though all that's needed for a choropleth is GeoID and title, a GeoJSON can still contain many additional fields and still work as a choropleth. Let's demonstrate that here. Here is a census file where I added GeoID and title to the end of the attribute table and then exported it. So the GeoJSON still carries along all of the original census fields. That census GeoJSON is the same one that's driving this choropleth layer in this example. But none of those census fields can be accessed here. We can't use them, so they're just increasing the file size and hurting web performance. We recommend deleting all the unnecessary fields and just populating choropleth GeoJSONs with the GeoID and title fields. Another type of layer you may add to an IBIS map is an interactive display layer. These display layers may be used to represent landmarks, such as these cities. This type of layer has the ability to be interactive in the sense that we're able to call up data pop-ups or mouse overs. Here we have facility locations, such as childcare centers, and their associated information. In these layers, IBIS dimension values and databases don't come into play. All the information that we're accessing through these layers is contained within the GeoJSON attribute table itself. So in a sense, we have free rein to include any types of data fields that we wish, but that runs the risk of increasing file size and impacting web performance. There is one field requirement that we should point out for these interactive display layers. Notice that we don't necessarily have a GeoID field in these layers, although that field can certainly be present, as in the cities, although it actually might be desirable to include a GeoID field in any display layer, in case the display layer might someday be adopted for use as a choropleth layer. However, in a display layer, the title field is still required. Let me demonstrate that by opening up a pop-up from this interactive county layer and from this interactive county layer. The title field which is present in this layer, is used to populate the header of the data pop-up. Without a title field, the pop-up header reverts to a default unknown area message. Other display layers that you may add to an IBIS map can be set to not be interactive. These layers may represent landmarks, such as roads or waterways, that are useful for getting oriented, but we don't necessarily want them to give us a data pop-up. So there aren't necessarily any data requirements for a static display layer. It's probably good practice to keep the number of fields to a minimum to keep the file size as small as possible. It's also probably a good idea to still include a GeoID and title field, in case the display layer might someday be adopted for use as a choropleth layer as well. And you can certainly create duplicates of any layer, one version for use as a choropleth and one for use as a display layer, each with its own set of attribute fields. The last type of display layer you might load in an IBIS map is a label layer. We use a separate non-interactive layer to contain the labels of other display layers like regions or cities or counties. So far, this seems to be the best approach to labeling map features in Leaflet because we are able to control the label position and display. There is a separate instructional video about how to create a label layer, but as far as the attribute table is concerned, it's similar to an interactive display layer, in the sense that the GeoID field is not necessary, but it's permissible. The title layer is required, because that's where the map text is called from. So, let's review. For GeoJSONs, which are going to be used for choropleth layers, recall that we can't access any of the attributes of the GeoJSON itself. There are only two required fields, GeoID and title. Additional fields serve no purpose and only add to the file size. For layers that are going to be used as interactive layers, all of the pop-up information is pulled out of the GeoJSON attribute table. A GeoID field is not required, but certainly permissible. Title is required to populate the data pop-up headers. Without a title field, we get a default message. For non-interactive GeoJSON layers, where we don't get any data pop-ups, there are no table restrictions, but a GeoID and title could certainly be included. For label layers, again, a GeoID is not required, but the title is in order to populate the text. The next instructional videos will discuss how to actually edit attribute tables in QGIS and in ArcMap. Then later videos will demonstrate the ways to reduce GeoJSON file sizes to improve web performance. We hope this introductory video about IBIS mapping has been instructive. Please check out the other videos on the IBIS Community of Practice YouTube channel.